Ever wonder why that trip south of the border suddenly got a whole lot more expensive? Or why your favorite American online store seems to be constantly jacking up its prices? It's not just inflation. It's the dance between the Canadian dollar and the U.S. greenback, a tango that's been significantly impacted, shall we say, by the political climate, especially during the Trump years. We're not talking partisan politics here, mind you, but rather the economic ripple effects of policy decisions made south of the 49th parallel, and how those decisions played out in the currency markets, ultimately affecting Canadians' wallets and the broader Canadian economy. Think of it like this. The Canadian and U.S. economies are deeply intertwined, like two strands of DNA. We're each other's biggest trading partners, and any major shift in one economy inevitably sends tremors through the other. Now imagine a rather unconventional conductor suddenly taking the podium and deciding to change the tempo of the orchestra. That's a decent analogy for the Trump administration and its approach to trade, tariffs, and monetary policy. These changes weren't just abstract numbers in a spreadsheet. They had real-world consequences for Canadian businesses, consumers, and the value of our loonie. We're going to delve into how policies like tax cuts, trade negotiations, or renegotiations to be precise, and even just the general uncertainty surrounding the political landscape in the U.S. influence the Canadian dollar's performance. It's not a simple cause and effect relationship, of course. The value of a currency is influenced by a whole host of factors, from interest rates and commodity prices to global economic conditions and investor sentiment. But the Trump era definitely added a unique layer of complexity to the mix. This isn't just about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's about understanding the intricate web of economic forces that shape our daily lives. It's about recognizing how decisions made in Washington, D.C. can have a direct impact on the cost of groceries in Calgary, the price of gas in Halifax, or the viability of a manufacturing plant in Windsor. And it's about recognizing that navigating this complex landscape requires more than just a passing interest in the news. It requires a deeper understanding of the underlying economic principles at play. So, we're going to unpack the key events and policies of the Trump administration that had the most significant impact on the Canadian dollar. We'll look at the numbers, the trends, and the expert opinions to get a clearer picture of what happened and why. And we'll explore some of the lasting effects of those policies, as well as the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead for the Canadian economy. Get ready to dive into the sometimes murky waters of international finance and see how it all connects back to your everyday life, eh? To get a better handle on this, let's rewind a bit and look at the historical backdrop against which these events unfolded. The Canadian dollar, or loonie as we affectionately call it, has always had a somewhat complicated relationship with its American counterpart. For decades, it was often pegged to the U.S. dollar, creating a sense of stability but also limiting our monetary policy independence. Think of it like being tied to your sibling's hip at a party. You're always together, but you can't really dance to your own beat. Then, in the early 1970s, Canada decided to let the loonie float freely, meaning its value would be determined by market forces. This gave us more control over our economy, but it also introduced a degree of volatility. Commodity prices, particularly oil, became a major driver of the dollar's value, given Canada's role as a major exporter. So, when oil prices soared, so, too, did the loonie, and vice versa. Now, consider how this applies when you face a situation where the U.S. starts tinkering with its own economic levers in unexpected ways. The traditional relationship between commodity prices and the loonie gets, well, muddied. The Trump administration's focus on bringing manufacturing back to the U.S., for instance, had implications for Canadian industries that relied on exporting to the U.S. market. This, in turn, could put downward pressure on the loonie, regardless of what was happening with oil prices. Furthermore, the renegotiation of NAFTA, or what eventually became the Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement, CUSMA, injected a hefty dose of uncertainty into the Canadian economy. Businesses were hesitant to invest, and investors were wary of holding Canadian dollars, fearing that the trade relationship with our biggest partner could be severely disrupted. It was like trying to navigate a canoe through rapids with someone, constantly rocking the boat. Adding to the complexity, the U.S. Federal Reserve's monetary policy decisions also played a significant role. When the Fed raised interest rates, it tended to strengthen the U.S. dollar, as investors flocked to the U.S. seeking higher returns. This, in turn, could weaken the Canadian dollar, making it more expensive for Canadians to buy American goods and services. It's a bit like a seesaw. When one side goes up, the other goes down. Therefore, the historical context shows that while the loonie has always been influenced by external factors, the Trump era introduced a unique set of challenges and uncertainties that tested its resilience, especially given the pre-existing free-floating exchange rate system. All right, so where does this leave us, eh? We've seen how the historical context of the loonie, coupled with specific policy decisions south of the border, created a rather unique set of circumstances. It's not just a simple story of one country's actions directly causing another's currency to fluctuate. It's more like a complex ecosystem, where different species interact in unpredictable ways, and a change in one population can have cascading effects throughout the entire system. Reflecting on this journey so far, it's clear that the Canadian dollar's performance during the Trump years wasn't just about economics. It was also about psychology. The uncertainty and unpredictability surrounding trade policy, for example, created a sense of nervousness among investors, which in turn put downward pressure on the loonie. It's like when you're driving on a highway and suddenly see brake lights ahead. Even if there's no immediate danger, you instinctively slow down. Investor sentiment can have a similar effect on currency markets. Putting it another way, it's kind of like watching a hockey game where the refs keep changing the rules mid-play. Even if you're a seasoned player, it's tough to anticipate what's coming next, and that uncertainty can affect your performance. Canadian businesses and investors faced a similar challenge during this period, trying to navigate a rapidly changing economic and political landscape. Taking all this into account, we can see that the value of the Canadian dollar is not just some abstract number on a screen. It's a reflection of the complex interplay of economic forces, political decisions, and investor sentiment. It's a barometer of the overall health of the Canadian economy, and it has a direct impact on the lives of everyday Canadians, from the price of groceries to the cost of travel. As we pivot towards the final reflection, it's important to remember that the story of the Canadian dollar is far from over. The global economy is constantly evolving, and new challenges and opportunities are always on the horizon. Understanding the lessons of the past can help us navigate the future with greater confidence and resilience. So, what's the takeaway from all of this then? It's not just about understanding the specific economic policies of a single administration or the fluctuating value of a currency. It's about recognizing the interconnectedness of our world and how decisions made in one place can ripple out and affect people thousands of miles away. It's a reminder that even seemingly abstract economic concepts have very real consequences for our daily lives. Ultimately, the experience of the Canadian dollar during the Trump years highlights the importance of resilience and adaptability in the face of uncertainty. Just like a sturdy maple tree bending in the wind, the Canadian economy needs to be able to weather storms and adapt to changing conditions. This requires a combination of sound economic policies, strategic investments, and a willingness to embrace innovation. It also underscores the need for Canadians to be informed and engaged citizens, capable of understanding the complex forces that shape our world. It's not enough to simply complain about the price of gas or the cost of groceries. We need to understand the underlying factors that are driving those prices, and we need to hold our elected officials accountable for making decisions that are in the best interests of all Canadians. Looking ahead, the challenges facing the Canadian economy are likely to be even more complex and multifaceted. From climate change and technological disruption to global political instability, There are a whole host of factors that could impact the value of the loonie and the overall prosperity of our nation. But amidst all the uncertainty, there's also reason for optimism. Canada has a strong foundation, a talented workforce, and a rich natural resource base. By embracing innovation, investing in education, and fostering a spirit of collaboration, we can build a more resilient and prosperous future for all Canadians. The true practice begins now, then, not just in understanding the past, but in applying those lessons to the present and future. It's about recognizing the interconnectedness of our world, the importance of informed citizenship, and the need for resilience in the face of uncertainty. It's about building a Canada that is strong, prosperous, and able to weather any storm that comes our way, eh?